And if you ever go to the bathroom there, that's okay.
All right, it is 6 p.m., and so while it is during Halloween and we're enjoying telling our ghost stories, we probably should get to our business of the evening. Al, roll call.
Benson.
Here.
Johnson. Present. Maibaum. Aye. Schramm.
Here.
Villanueva.
Here. Present.
Mayor Mosier.
Here.
City Manager Leon.
Here.
City Attorney Denherter.
Here.
All right, now is the time and the place for anybody that public wants to appear in front of the commission on something not on the work session agenda. Seeing no movement, we will go ahead and turn it over to City Manager Leon for our strategic planning update.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Mayor and members of the commission. We're a little bit smaller of a group this evening, so hopefully that we can have some good discussion. I wanted to provide the public and provide you with a little update on our 2022 to 2025 strategic plan. We've made a lot of progress and we have a lot to report. Before we do that though, I know you have the plan in front of you. I'd like to start with this side, the mission, values, and trends priority side of the document, and just take a minute to reaffirm our mission with you, which is to provide exemplary experiences, services, and spaces that create opportunities for everyone to learn, engage, and thrive. And as I was looking at this this morning, I thought that it was important for you all to know that, and for the public to know that this is intentional for us. So we do talk about that when we're providing services and events and things like that, is trying to make them and our spaces exemplary for people. We try to be intentional about the fact that we want to make sure that we're providing spaces and events and services that include everybody and that are for everyone in our community, and also that we're communicating and engaging with the citizens as to what it is we are doing. So we take an intentional approach to that and weigh that against the decisions we make, and I think that's important to know that at least in our organization, the mission statement isn't something that we just have, it's something that we try to live. So I also try to point out to you all weekly someone in our organization who's really embodying the mission, and I think that's important for us to keep at the forefront of our minds. I wanted to talk a little bit about our values and trends driving decisions, because sometimes we find that easy to answer the questions and tick off, the values that a decision makes. I think sometimes, and this has happened this year, values conflict, or sometimes values conflict with the trends driving our decisions. So sometimes it's hard to maintain fiscal stewardship in all areas and manage the expectations of citizens. So we're constantly kind of walking that tightrope and trying to find that balance. Sometimes it's hard to lead and make a decision, as you all know, as a position you're put in as commissioners, and manage those expectations and provide all the resources in all the areas that you're asked to provide. So we do take a look at those, consider those, definitely, and we also know that they conflict. So there's no secret formula there. It's something that we have to constantly assess and talk about. And we do that. We try to hold each other accountable in the decisions that we make as a staff. We also know that you have priorities that we talked about, and those are on the right-hand side of the page there. I just wanted to take housing for example. Housing isn't something directly that we're involved with, but that's where like a value of collaboration comes in. And we know the trends that driving our decisions are human capital, workforce readiness, and labor availability, et cetera. And so we're trying to find ways where we can help while still achieving our goals. infrastructure and maintaining our experiences and services and making the community livable. So I think if you think at a deeper level on a lot of the projects that you've been discussing as a team this year, you'll see that they might tick off a couple of things in the same network. Some of these things, too, are never going to be complete. We'll never be done with infrastructure. We'll never be done, managing expectations. But I think that they're really still very relevant and meaningful themes to keep with us as we do our work. So any questions or anything anyone like to say or comment about this side of the page? It's kind of the softer side of the page, but I think it's of the plan, but I think it's important to touch on and think about. Okay, that was easy then. We can talk a little bit about updates on projects, and I hope that you'll interrupt me and ask more questions than are on the page. We also have department heads here if you get really technical. I'll just go down the list because I think some of these are, we haven't talked a lot about. Our water and wastewater modeling project is finishing up. We have the GIS data collection that was undertook this summer by that company, SAM, if you remember that. Staff has reviewed that sanitary sewer collections and GIS data, and they're finishing the final sewer map. The water system data has also been collected, and we're currently looking at those maps as a staff. That organization will need to come back, I'm guessing, in the spring and collect any data that they find missing. But we think probably by the end of the year we'll be in pretty good shape, so HDR can start doing our modeling. Once the models are complete, we'll determine if there's any areas we need to look into further in the upcoming months, and so we can put that into a master plan by the end of next year. So by this time next year, have that master plan. So I don't know that us looking at the data is going to mean a lot. Kyle will help us interpret that. But one of the things that the things we'll need to talk about when we understand where we sit is what is our goal in terms of the cast iron water mains? Should we replace all of them? And if so, how are we going to do that and what time frame? Should we start replacing the clay tile sewer lines? Yes, but when do we start doing that? Do we replace just bad sections? Do we, start mapping out areas of town? Do we line that clay sewer? At some point, we're going to really need to develop like our philosophy and our plan, and that plan will probably outlive, I'm guessing, most of you on the city commission, unless you're going to do a 20 or 25-year terms here on the city commission. So we do need to talk about that as a group. So I would think that 2020, maybe end of 2023, but certainly 2024, we'll be making some decisions about, okay, we have our plants taken care of, and our plants are going to be at least on the road to being all taken care of by that time. Our wastewater plant will have be well underway, but what is our distribution plan and what is our system plan? And we're going to need to decide that, and those are going to be kind of big community questions because all of that also comes with an expense. So any questions on that?
If I remember right, was there some grant money, federal money for some of the water service lines that might be lead yet going from the mains to the house?
I think so. Kyle, do you want to grab the other mic? I think there may be, certainly. Kyle will know more about that.
Hopefully. That's going to be, the first phase of it is what they call, we have to do a lead service line inventory. One of the things that we do have also budgeted is through our SRF funding is our meter replacement project. So when we go in and do the meter replacement, when that contractor goes in to replace those meters, we'll have them collect that data for those lead service lines. I think that has to be completed by 2024, the end of 2024. Then the next phase of that will be, which is still kind of up in the air, in terms of the city of Yankton, we do not own the service lines. We don't have easements or right-of-ways. So it's going to be difficult sometimes to require landowners to give us permission to go in and do that. So there's going to be a lot of legal questions with that. There's going to be a lot of questions yet on the funding. So there's a lot of unknowns on that new lead and copper regulations. So to be honest, there'll probably be some court battles before we get there. So.
The wastewater plant decisions and plans, you guys made a lot of the plans and made a lot of decisions already this year. Where we are is that we are working on completing the EDA project, that project that was initiated after the flooding in 2019. Some of the electrical switch gears for that are still 52 weeks out in delivery. We'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges we're facing with some of our projects at our next meeting, but knowing that, that's going to push everything sort of down the line. But we do have an engineer selected to help us with our CMAR that we're going to recommend to you. Ross and Kyle and some of Kyle's staff and I have been talking with owners' representatives as well as attorneys who specialize in CMARs, and we believe we found great consultants for both. When we talked with you last time, we had some reservation about working with a consultant, an owner's rep consultant, not really sure that we need that, but in talking with other cities in the state, they really advocated for that, and we really liked what we heard. So we're going to be recommending that to you in contracts coming up yet this year, and hopefully get underway here in December. The first contract they'll look at then is the engineer's contract, and then we'll be presenting that to you, and then we'll be putting together the CMAR, and they'll be reviewing that with us. So we're starting to move forward with that project, that side of the project too. So we do need to spend those ARPA funds by January 1, 2026. And Kyle thinks we can do that, but we're thinking that the final completion now for all those improvements won't be until 2027. And we have talked about before with prices and delivery and things like that, we may be cutting some of the things out of the project that we had hoped to do initially, but we're just going to have to wait and see how that all falls together. That's the 30,000-foot view, but if you have questions specific on that project or the EDA project, Kyle can answer them.
So would it be silly then, do you think, just to continue as planned before anything were to be cut? Simply because I think we've come back to this multiple times. There's a high likelihood, that these deadlines are going to get pushed. Again, just given everything that's going on with our economy. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
I wouldn't allow myself, and I wouldn't encourage anybody on staff to already start falling into that line of thinking at this point.
well, we expect that we may have to cut something, but we certainly won't. And now we have the power of negotiating. We don't have that in a design bid build. So there might be a different way to accomplish the same thing that we don't know about. So that's why we have, the CMAR. But one of the reasons why we want to do the CMAR process, we can change the project, maybe accomplish the same goals. And who knows, by the time we get a couple years down the line, there might be more, might not be ARPA, but there may be other funding programs that we're eligible for. So we certainly don't want to cut anything. We just feel a little bit nervous about the way the construction costs are coming in, and that may change. But I agree with you. We shouldn't be looking for things to cut yet at this point. We're not even near design. So I think what I'll do is forward, Kyle sent me an update on a lot of the things he's working on, and I'll probably have Jean put this in your commission information OneDrive, and you can follow up if you have questions, but it's all the more technical updates on where we are with all Kyle's projects. So he doesn't need more to do yet. Cybersecurity is something, one of those trends that is both immediate and also long-term, which we're just never going to be complete. Since we've talked about it and made it a priority, Dwayne and his staff are doing their best on a daily basis, but also touching back with us to make our systems as safe as possible. We had some opportunity at the South Dakota Municipal League to attend some training on cybersecurity. And basically, you know, we're not at, I guess, at the whim of the world, but everything changes so quickly that it's just an ongoing process. So Dwayne has given us some trainings, what I would call sort of mini trainings at our department head meetings of examples of things, particularly with email and phishing, that we need to be cognizant of, and has alerted staff when there's certain things that are going around, malware, et cetera. We're waiting to hear if there's any cybersecurity grant opportunities available through the state. I think that there is some federal funds available, and I'm not sure if our state yet has accepted or opted into that program. We hope so. But I just don't think there's ever going to be enough money to make it 100% safe. So we're doing the best we can. We're getting better at it. I got a email that looked like somebody had left me a voicemail on my email from a Google account. Well, that may be accurate, but I didn't want to risk opening it, whereas before I would have opened and listened. So I figured if it was really important, they'll get back to me, and we do have to apologize to people if there is something legitimate that we don't click on, but we just can't risk that. So we have people's payroll information, and you know, we have everybody's address in our community, and sometimes their bank information if they do an automatic withdrawal. So it just isn't really worth risking just to, you know, be curious about a Google account that says they left you a voicemail and voicemail spelled wrong. So, Dwayne, do you have anything on cybersecurity that you think is important for them to know?
The only thing I would add is the wiring project we did at City Hall, some changes for us, and that will specific to the
Okay, yes. So throughout the year, Dwayne and his team have worked on improving our wiring system. Now the brain of City Hall certainly looks a lot more organized, but I think some things are separated, so they're not, the networks are separated, so they're not as at risk. That's definitely above my pay grade of understanding, but I also know on the police and dispatch side, Dwayne and his team have worked hard to make sure that we have the ability to be redundant and risking the information as little as possible. So as I sit on the E911 board, we've talked a lot about some technology that might be helpful, but weighing out, is it worth the risk of exposing the, you know, other information? So we're talking about that as well. Fire chief hire, we're just going to put a tick mark by that. We got that done. Pretty straightforward. So right now, Chief Linke is working with a team of stakeholders and with his volunteers on developing some master planning and some strategic planning specifically for the department. He's visited with Ross about changing some of the bylaws and some of the structure to update a bit and do some of that admin work that probably needs to be done, and also talk to the community about, you know, hey, what is it we're about? What is our mission statement? What are our goals? Where do we see ourselves in the future? And having some real earnest discussion about that. We also have to look at that human capital side that applies to our volunteers as well, and making sure we have staggered enough in sort of age and where folks are at in their lives so that we continue to have a robust and well-trained department into the future. So he's working on that. And I think that'll be good for the entire community. Also, some of the changes, even that you'll see before you at your regular meeting this evening, to make sure we maintain that ISO rating or improve it into the future if that's important to the community. Our CBA, our collective bargaining agreement, our fraternal order of police agreement, and our employee manual and our FMLA policies. We have about half of that completed right now. We're still negotiating with AFSCME on their labor agreement. We're not updating the employee manual until we have all of our labor agreements updated and negotiated. So before you, hopefully in the next few months, you'll have the AFSCME, it's the American Federation of County, State, Municipal Employees agreement in front of you. We did, however, work through our FMLA policies and also our work comp policies, and I think we have that in a much better place than it was even a year ago. So we're making progress there as well. Our water meter update, I'm jumping back to Kyle's department. We're continuing to research water meter options. We did get some of that SRF funding as part of that package to migrate our current system to what we call the AMI system, Advanced Metering Infrastructure. That's an integrated system of water meters and communication networks, data management that enables two-way communication between meters and the actual utility. So my understanding is not only is this more an efficient way to get the final end bill, but also you have real-time information. So, and Kyle, you can stop me if I'm not correct. I would be able to see, or utilities would be able to see how much water I'm actually using each day and be able to alert me or alert a major manufacturer if that was going to go, if that went, way off the charts, implying a leak or something like that. So it's more of a real-time data. People that are high users might use it more as a tool to manage the data, manage their own service, but also it will automatically read it, so we won't have to be driving around and collecting the information. So, of course, this ties back to things like cybersecurity. Anything like that is also an exposure. So those aren't conflicting goals or projects, but we just have to layer those decisions into our decisions about cybersecurity. So the best meter vendor may not be the best when it comes to cybersecurity. So we're going to have to weigh that out. Many South Dakota cities are working on that, though. So we have a lot of communities that we're working with and sharing information on. So
I do have a question about that, and I'm just kind of curious. Are they over-the-air respond? Like, does it send a Bluetooth signal out? Does it send a wireless signal out that's collected to different receivers across town? How are they communicating that, or is it hardwired, which I think would be really difficult?
The option we're looking at will most likely be radio.
Radio frequency.
So we'll put what they call gateway antennas on probably the 2 water towers and possibly need a third one. There is an option to do that in combination with cellular ones if we have some areas where we can't get radio to work. But I think we're going to stay away from the cellular and just stick with the radio. And then once we can, we pick up with our gateways. We'll have to go out and pick up manually once a month. So.
So with that, I'll move on to the e-tickets. I think just so for the community's understanding, these are electronic tickets which our officers give to people instead of the paper ticket and logging all the information manually handwritten. It isn't something that you drive past and if you're speeding you get a ticket. So just wanted to make sure folks understood that because we had a question about that. That's up and running and our officers are getting used to that process. I think it's going well so far. We're still not fully implemented because we have to print the actual ticket to give it to the courthouse in the end, but hopefully county and state will get up to speed on those things and eventually we hopefully won't have to do that. But it is more efficient for our officers, and I guess if it's ever efficient to get a ticket, it's an easier process for the individual as well because they can scan their driver's license, their ID, etc. So. Martin Creek repairs, before the end of the year yet in November, we hope to be putting a bid in front of you. We are out for bid now for that project and we've had some interest, so we hope we have more interest and we hope we have a good bid come back on the Martin Creek repair. So that project, if we have a dry winter, some of that work can start yet this year, and we're hoping we get competitive bids there. Frustrating a little bit for all of us. It's 2023 really now, essentially, that we'll be getting started, and the flood happened in 2019, but FEMA, so we'll be excited when we get going on that. Comp plan update.
Amy, if I could back you up, I thought maybe you were skipping FEMA earlier in the list because you were
Oh.
going to tie those two projects together. Was there any
Nope.
updates on the FEMA line since you?
I just accidentally skipped over it, but I think probably it would be helpful for Dave maybe to help me out on that update. So the FEMA floodplain mapping that we were working on with FEMA individuals, initially we did not agree with the mapping that FEMA provided, and we presented that to you, and we asked you about us making an appeal, if that's the right language, to FEMA with the map, and we had HDR help us out with some additional readings, which FEMA Region 8 accepted and read and took into account and substantially changed the map from where it was. So at this point, there are still some areas that they believe are in floodplain and that we maybe don't 100% agree with, but the map looks a lot better for property owners in Yankton now than it did previously, so we were able to work through that process with them. So we are agreeing to now the revised map that they've been provided. And I don't know for the timeline, Dave, they'll have to come and still do a public hearing with that revised map, is my understanding.
Yeah, correct. So far, we've been working from what are called work maps, and the next step is for FEMA to take that to what's called a preliminary map. And when they do that, there will be published public meetings and comment periods where everybody can come and review the preliminary map, including Planning Commission, City Commission, and members of the public, in general. At the point we're at right now, it's with the investment that you all made for our technical response, the map is kind of going to be the map, and any changes will be onesie, twosie, or subdivision sorts of things that happen through a normal process after the map is adopted. So yeah, it's good news for the Martin Creek watershed, which was the largest area of our concern. So that's good.
Dave, prior to the revisions, I think the number was somewhere in 250-ish range of, I can't remember exactly, quite a few properties that were going to be affected by the map. What would you estimate that has come down to, if you can?
There's a really long answer to that question, and then there's probably the shorter. So the properties that the technical response addressed to FEMA's satisfaction are the ones in the Martin Creek watershed, and there was 243 properties there that would have been included into the floodway, not just added to the floodplain, but in the floodway. And the technical response and the preliminary map, as far as we know right now, are going to show essentially the existing 2010 map as the map we're gonna be working from. So yeah, that number reduced. Some of the east drainage basin and west drainage basin, there'll be some slight changes there, but those are not very extreme and still able to be managed with floodplain development permits and elevation changes and things like that.
And so some of the properties that we, as a city, acquired along Martin Creek had remained in that floodway either way.
Correct, yeah. So those acquisitions were directly related to hazard mitigation, and they were properties in imminent threat based on, how the erosion and the bank erosion was occurring. And a couple of them were acquisitions based on the fact that it was less expensive to acquire them than it was to massively over-design the bank stabilization at those locations, just so that, you know, a fairly modest investment was, you know, could be saved when, you know, it worked out for everybody, owner and city alike, just to acquire the property.
Do you have an idea in mind, in the years to come? Are there any more modest investments that you can envision the city possibly being able to make?
Yeah, sure. We have, as a part of our process of identifying at-risk properties, we ranked them, and those were the ones that we brought before you to apply for grant money to acquire, and those are the 6 that we did acquire. We do have a map that includes other properties in that ranking list, and if flood hazard mitigation money is available for those acquisitions, then we definitely will bring a memo before you and for consideration of acquiring those also.
Thank you, Dave. Anything else on the FEMA process? And thank you, Mayor, for pointing that out. Going back down a little bit further down the list then to the comprehensive plan update, that was pushed. We pushed that forward to 2023, 2024, splitting that up, mainly because we don't have final census data yet. So there isn't a good reason to move forward, although we're still fully intending to until we have the final census data. So we're ready to go with an RFP when we know what we're putting in it. So we'll be working on that. That'll be a big planning process that we'll certainly ask the community and other stakeholders to be involved in. The Cedar Street Big or Bridge Improvement Grant application, we probably won't be looking at construction of the Cedar Street Bridge until 2025, so we probably won't make that application yet. With the state big program, what the grant that we have right now is for design and engineering, and so we'll be working throughout the year on engineering. The state did make a change to the placement of the bridge, so we have to do some redesign as well, but that's going to stay on our comprehensive plan a little bit longer. Bridges are tricky. They're expensive and specialized in terms of engineers that do them in our area of the country. So hopefully we have a good outcome when we get to that point, but we'll be a little while yet, and we'll continue to watch the rating on that bridge. The 1929 water plant, we took a few of the steps that you all mentioned were important to you and gave direction on at a previous work session earlier in the spring. So we have rezoned, and recently we have all the asbestos removed. And actually, Dave and his department, I think it was Brad Bees, that worked pretty hard on the asbestos removal grant and so he's been able to be successful with a couple of grant applications for asbestos removal for a number of buildings, but the 1929 water plant being one of them. So that's been removed. So that discussion will be back before you probably in the new year to talk about, okay, now we did those few things. Now, what do you want to do, or do you want to do anything different? As you are learning too, you know, we have a certain capacity as well as to what we can all move forward at once. So we'll talk about, you know, is it a good time to be trying to find a lessee? Is that still what we want to do? Do we want to do something different? So things to just kind of percolate in your head over the next few months, and kind of watching the market too and seeing what we're hearing. So that's another discussion that we'll revisit. West Side Park, exciting plans and exciting status. So the clay liner has been put in. They're not done with their dirt work yet, but that's been put in. And my understanding is that if everything went well this afternoon, they were going to start filling the pond. So I haven't driven by, but Donnie turned on the hydrant and we're ready to go. So we're wondering how much water actually is going in there. We're making that fun in City Hall, but, so that's happening, so that's exciting. I'm going to be inviting you to the dedication here at our public meeting coming up November 7th. Also, our contractor is the same on that project as was awarded for the Labyrinth and Sundial, and they're just going to continue to work as long as weather holds out. So if we continue to have a long fall, they'll continue to work there. Not necessarily part of the plan, but part of that bigger picture is that Crystal Nelson is aiming, and the Mead folks are aiming to remove some of the smaller buildings out yet this fall, as well as the caboose. So we'll be working with her on that. So that could make that park look a lot different really quickly. Todd and his staff are working to place the new playground equipment there in the park, and so we're excited for what that's going to look like too. So it's going to be, I think, a nice project when it's all said and done. We talked a little bit about the rewiring project. I don't know, I don't understand all the technicalities of it. I don't know, Dwayne, if there's anything else you want to say about it other than if the commission has questions. Okay, then I'm just going to keep going. The North Broadway Stormwater Management Plan is something ongoing that we continually consider as development happens on the north side of town. So, you know, right now, there is some construction ongoing on the north side of town, and there's about to be more. So that's something we're going to continue to work on and need to look at in a more comprehensive way as we continue to grow and build in that area. Our active transportation plan projects have gone very well. We've gotten a lot of the priority areas out of the way. In 2023, I'll be talking to the staff about perhaps needing to revisit that map, coming to you in a work session, talking about what are the next priorities. Some of those are project driven, and other of those are just our areas that we want to address. But we've really come a long way with that program and put in a lot of connective sidewalks, I think. So I think that's been a successful use of that additional fund. I think next year's plan is to do some of the sidewalk on the North Broadway by the Paradigm Project. And then, of course, this year we have sidewalk along West Side Park going in as part of that plan. So I think that's been a good project. The transportation / utility projects, Build America, you know, is there going to be more funding available to us? Perhaps. Will we be ready for it? We think so. You know, we've bitten off a lot this year that's yet to be built, but we'll certainly continue to work with District 3 as well as the state as and when we hear of more programming, if there is any. So part of that will depend upon what our state is willing to accept in terms of dollars. They don't have to participate, and so that could be an issue as well. But hopefully we can continue to be, we can continue a profit. I think South Dakota, because of our size, usually comes out pretty well when you come to the ratio of federal funding, and we've certainly taken advantage of that here. The communication Tell Our Story is one that we continue to try to do on a daily basis, and I'll try to do tonight in my city manager's comments a little bit when we talk about just where we are as an organization, what we're seeing, what we're experiencing, so that the community and certainly you understand, you know, where we're challenged and where we're constrained, where we have constraints, and what's different than it was just 2 years ago. So I'm continuing to talk to people about the fact that just like in our regular lives, we as a city and organization are facing sort of a new economy and a new labor force and a new way of business. And, you know, we're not used to waiting for things. either. And we're having to learn to do that. So that's different, and we're adjusting. So that's part of our story, but I think it's important that we continue to tell that when we have the opportunity. Our marijuana light,
excuse me.
oh, I'm sorry.
So when it comes to communications, like if we have a big project, do we kind of map out what we see as the communication points for that project and how it will be communicated?
We do. What's difficult sometimes, and maybe with your experience in communications, you can help us. You know, a lot of the things that we're working on are highly technical. It's pretty hard, even for me, as close as I am to the wastewater projects and improvements, to understand all the working parts. And when a technician like Kyle starts talking about it, it can easily be lost in, you know, the gobbledygook of, you know, all things water and environmental services. And some of those things that we're really excited about, like the sewer project that's going to go underneath the railroad in Gale Drive, that's exciting to me. And most people, when I start getting excited about that, think, you know, how can someone nerd out on something like that? The sewer really isn't the story. The story is the fact that that gives Yankton the opportunity to grow and to circles back to that mission of thriving and creating opportunity. And so that's where it gets exciting. So we don't always hit the mark, so to say. We get a lot of times, because we're close to the projects, at least I get close to the details where we should be really talking about the end game. So that's an area where I think, at least I know I can improve. Probably people will be upset that traffic might be disrupted during the project and know something big's happening there, but not understand what it means for the future. And so that's where I think we have to be better at talking about those things.
Yeah, I even think of something I was thinking about as I looked at this was the Summit Center project and how that came to a head. And in retrospect, as a commissioner, you know, I probably should have. I feel like I was too close to it, you know, because we've been discussing it for so many years. Didn't really appreciate how it would be a surprise to most of the public, and so I just thought, you know, that's one case study where it might be worth doing a hot wash. Is what could we do differently to do better next time? And I think that goes for commissioners as well as staff.
Yeah, I mean,
And I don't mean to criticize anyone, so
yeah,
I'm just pointing out an area where I feel like I kind of failed in some levels.
well, I don't think we're ever done communicating. And I think, too, like, you can also communicate all you want, but you also have to be receptive. So some people probably don't pay attention to a lot of things going on in the city unless something that directly they utilize or a service that they are close to goes away. So I'm sure a lot of people didn't know much about the water plant, for example, except it's going to cost them more money. However, they would certainly have known if we hadn't done the project, and we would have had a lot of water restrictions placed this year because we couldn't let people water their grass. You know, that would have been, then it would have been another matter. But I think, too, with the, agreed, we can always do a good job communicating. I think the communication seems to come so easy now that sometimes we don't stop and have conversation. We might put out information, but we don't have the conversation, and that's requires listening and understanding too. So,
Amy had a quick question about communication. I think one of the things we had talked about during this session that we had was not just local communication, but as well as trying to, whether it be through marketing and tourism, just trying to tell Yankton's story to a larger and broader audience that maybe attract some people to come and live here, work here. Are we doing any type of marketing besides just local?
so we are. You know, some of that's directly related to facilities like the summit, and I know Todd and Luke are making a lot of plans there going forward. But like the Huther Family Aquatic Center, I think some of that is also done through groups that I would say we have partnerships with, but we're not directly involved with. The Optimist Club comes to mind, for example, with what they do during the holidays at Riverside Park. Riverboat Days has always done that for us. to me, I always think of Jake Hoffner, and everyone knows who Jake is when I think of that kind of communication, because he's a person who every opportunity he has sells Yankton. He sells Yankton to people that live in Yankton. I don't know, and he's excited about it, and that's all our job, to connect, the dots. So we see somebody from out of town that asks us direction, we ask them what they're doing here, all the good things about Yankton and why they should move here, and, really making people understand why we enjoy it so much. So that's ongoing. That's not a program that we have, but that's something that we try to instill in people. And certainly Jake taught me that every opportunity is really a marketing opportunity to talk about, all the great things that happen here. He also taught me the expression, why say no when it feels so good to say yes. If you all remember that. Communication, so that's something that's going to be important with all of these things. Moving on down the list to marijuana licensing, I thought we did a really good job and a phenomenal job working through that. We had a team cannabis, as you recall. We had some great, out of the gates, we were one of the first folks to get our ordinances in order and get things lined up and get an opened distribution center. A lot of communities are still working through that process. I'm not going to check this one off the list because I don't know what's going to happen in November. And then whatever happens in November, does that change what we're doing now, and do we need to change what we're doing in the future? I don't know where that's going to end up. If I were a commissioner, I'd be thinking about, okay, what could be the implications? What if we have local options for only medical, or medical and recreational if it passes? Or what if we have the option, do we let our medical folks do the recreational? So those are things, questions that you can start thinking about rolling around in the back of your head, maybe not too seriously until after November and then after the legislative session, but things we're going to have to maybe deal with. I haven't watched the polls, but I think there's a possibility that it's not a if we're going to end up doing this. If it's not this time, it could be a when are we going to end up having this conversation, because it may come back in the future if it doesn't pass this time. So
do you think our consultant would be willing to come back, and would there be value in that if it does pass?
Yeah,
this time?
I think so. I think if it passes, we'll have to kind of see what shakes out in the state, and then it would be probably a good idea. We did have a lot of conversation with him about states that started with medical and then went to recreational. Most of the medical places didn't seem relevant after recreational passed. But maybe if there is a local control, there might be a community conversation to have about what is right for our community. That'll be an interesting process. But yeah, I think having him help us navigate through that could be beneficial. We've been through the process once, so I would feel better about it going through it now the second time. But emergencies and public health preparedness. So we're not expecting another pandemic, but we didn't expect the first ones, and we've had some waves, as you know, throughout this time since we put this plan together. So we still have levels of preparedness, and we're still dealing with a little bit of illness here and there, but by and large, we're in a much better place than we were before. Some things have just gone away or changed, and we're still adjusting. But a lot of state meetings that we all used to get in the car and drive to Pier 4, they're handled online now, and that's okay. But you do miss a certain level of interaction that way. So we're working through those things as well. But I'm thinking that we are in a better place if we need to do something different or react in the future. Our facade grant execution, I think, has been pretty good this year. We're right now in the process of winding down some projects. In fact, I think in the next scheduled bills, you'll have a project before you that's been complete. So we're giving all those folks the benefit of the doubt because of the availability, contractors, et cetera. But we did have one returned who said they no longer wanted to pursue the grant, but other than that, we've had a really good success rate. So we're happy with that.
Do we still have, was it just one outstanding? Was that it? Are they all substantially complete at this point?
They're getting very close. The problem is as City Manager Leon said, there's some folks that are having difficulty getting materials. So I think there's 2 that are still outstanding, plus the third that declined the grant. So I think there's 2 of them that are still waiting for a few things, but they're wrapping up pretty quick now.
The SAC operations, I think we all heard folks' direction on that, and so I won't spend a lot of time on that. You'll continue to see updates on it. We did send out information in the water bills about folks that might want to be part of that task force. Have gotten some feedback yet back from that, so those names will be forwarded to Todd Larson and to Stephanie, and we'll work on getting a committee together, a task force together that can help work on some of those other questions about the facility and plans for the facility. So you'll likely have more recommendations before you as a body to consider for that facility. We're also in contact with the school, of course, to continue the negotiation on that agreement with them for that facility. The Fox Run golf course lease was renegotiated, as you know, and I'm not ticking that off the mark yet, just because we know with the conditions of the course this year, we had some questions about that. They have completed the well house and pump that is now operating, and they have had some changes in their staffing. They've had some movement of their staffing for probably the betterment of the course maintenance, and they also have been able to do some of those fall maintenance items that we suggested that occur this fall. So hopefully we have a really wet winter, and we're going to see more improvement on the course. But I am hearing from people that it's in better shape than what we were hearing from earlier in the summer. So as the weeks get colder, you might not hear as many updates from me, but I think we're on a better trajectory than we thought we were earlier this spring and summer. Cemetery property plan, that's one that we'll probably throw back to you as a question if you want to tackle that in the future. We talked about it a couple times already, and it didn't, we weren't really sure if the timing was right there. So, if that's brought forward again, we'll pick it up again and bring it forward to you to talk about, decide. We're just hearing that there isn't direction right now moving forward with that. So, if it continues to be something that's brought to us as a development interest, then we'll bring it again to you all. And I should call that, we're not supposed to call it the cemetery property plan. We should call it the North Broadway frontage property, right? Okay.
So on that, how do you actually want to hear that from us? You just need 5 of us to inform you that we're interested in making sure that it's being marketed properly to the region, that it's available?
Well, I would just, yes. I mean, I would need to hear that that's what you, that you want to do is move forward with a RFP. We brought an RFP forward to you, a draft to kick around and talk about, but we would need direction that actually, yes, you would want to, us to put a marketing piece out or, tell people we're ready to accept RFPs. And we didn't feel that message confidently coming from majority of you yet, and a lot of community feedback that maybe that wasn't the best thing to move forward with, so we haven't brought it forward again. But to me, if I start hearing feedback from individuals on the commission, then I would say, let's talk about it again in a work session or at a public meeting if that's something that's important.
So not now?
Not unless I'm given other direction, but.
Okay.
I won't spend a lot of time on basic services, daily operation, unforeseen events. We are working on fine-tuning some of our ordinances. I gave Ross a little list of some of those things. But one thing I want to say is, even in this labor market, I'm really pleased. I believe that we only have one full-time position open now, and we may even have an offer. We have an offer out to somebody on that full-time position. So I don't think we've been in that situation ever since I've been here. But certainly it's a good position for us to be in, given our labor market as well. So I don't know if your retirement leaves us one. We're okay until January, right? We're one down in January, one down now. Okay, so as of January, we're going to have one opening in the PD that we all know Preston is going to be going over to the sheriff's office. So we're going to try to get that position filled here. But currently, right now, as it stands, we're pretty full. And that's, I think, a human resources victory. The police department has been really intentional about making our hiring process more expeditious, not less rigorous, but more expeditious. And we filled, I think, 5 positions this year in that department. And we filled in sanitation now. And so we just have to now step back and let everyone trust them to do their job. So I'm excited about that. We have not done a good job, I don't think, of taking the time to have the big conversations as a staff. We're running at full capacity, I feel. And we did have kind of a vacation bell curve, I'd say, where a lot of people didn't take time off the last couple of years, and we're seeing people now taking their earned time, and we want them to. So I'm hoping that maybe over the winter months, some of these discussions can take place on some of these bigger things, because all of these things are right before our eyes, but the longer term things that you see here on the other side of the page are important to move forward on as well, and we can't rest because we have to build to get there. So it's sort of a crescendo every day, but if we're ever going to get to these long-term things, we have to have the opportunity to sit down and give them thought and attention. So I wanted to leave, and I realized I'm just leaving 2 or 3 minutes, but I wanted to leave those 2 or 3 minutes in case there's a burning, pressing question that someone has on the commission about a project or program.
We went away from an annual survey or a biannual survey several years ago. That, to me, maybe it's something we should reconsider looking at again.
Yeah, we sure can, if the commission so chooses. One thing we've noticed is that people have no problem communicating with us. Typically, we get daily feedback, I'd say, from our website where people can email a department. So to me, that's pretty good. We're getting a good response that way. We can certainly bring back the survey. If we brought back the survey, it might be beneficial to focus on a certain area and not try to cover everything in the community at once.
Yeah, I think if we did it, it might be worth working with a company that specializes in that, Gallup or one of those national companies. So then you also have a big database to compare your answers to. So it's not just, because we got to the point where we were kind of getting the same results every year, and it just didn't seem to be that informative.
I think too, like, it's nice to know how people feel to some extent, but it might be, might be worth having the conversation with the body here and with staff about, would it be better to have some specifics about some future projects, when we're looking at, if we have to make choices between maybe some big ticket long-term things, where are your interests, as opposed to try to cover everything from police to water to, the whole thing at once.
Yeah, that's where I would see value as well.
Yeah. Thank you for that question.
We have 1 minute, so unless anybody can ask a quick question to get an answer, we want to make sure we start our city commission meeting on time. So is there any last second?
Has to be a true or false.
True or false question. All right, with that, we have no
Thank
other
you.
business in front of the city commission in our work session tonight. So with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn the work session.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. And anybody abstaining? All right, the work session is